Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into the story of the Hermit's mushroom lantern. But before you settle in, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe only if you truly enjoy this kind of content. I would love to know where you are watching from and what time it is for you, so drop that in the comments. It's always amazing seeing people from all over the world tuning in. Now, dim the lights. Maybe switch on a fan for that cozy background. And let's drift into tonight's story together. You hear it before you see it. The wind moving through old pine needles. A soft, brushing sound like someone dragging a feather over a wool coat. You've been walking for a while. Or maybe dreaming that you are. Either way, the path under your bare feet is soft with moss, uneven with knuckled roots, and slightly damp, like the memory of rain passed through hours ago. A scent wafts through the air, moss, wood smoke, and something faintly mushroomy. Not the supermarket kind. This smells older, wilder, like a mushroom that knows secrets. Then you see it. The trees around you lean in just enough to feel personal, like old friends who speak only when necessary. Faint at first, a greenish gold hue bobbing between the trunks. Welcome to the story of the Hermit's mushroom lantern, a tale about isolation, observation, and glowing fungi. You're in good company now. He just turns, and you do what people have done for thousands of years. When a barefoot forest elder appears holding a mushroom lantern, you go. Not fire, not LED, something in between. As you step closer, the glow resolves into a lantern. Plants part like they know him. He smells faintly of wood smoke, thyme, and someone who hasn't owned soap in a while, but still manages to smell more honest than offensive. A strange one-in orb, made entirely of mushroom caps, stitched or grown together, each one pulsing softly with bioluminescence. You notice the edges of your vision starting to shimmer a little, not quite hallucination, just a soft blur, as if the forest is exhaling and you're breathing it in. Some did it out of curiosity, some out of medical interest, and a few just to escape choir practice. One monk, Brother Gilles, reportedly believed mushrooms were the forest's way of whispering. He took notes in secret and illuminated his manuscript margins with tiny glowing caps painted in powdered malachite and egg yolk. Scholars still debate whether Brother Gilles was divinely inspired or just extremely allergic to daylight. The lantern dangles from a crook stick held by a barefoot man whose beard could house a family of finches. His voice is gravel mixed with velvet. There's lacteous indigo blue as the sky, if the sky got shy. There's Armillaria malea, which glows so bright at night you can read a psalm by it. You nod like you already knew that. You didn't. You obey, because that's the vibe. We used to name them, he says. You raise an eyebrow. This forest is not trying to impress you. It already knows it's beautiful and doesn't feel the need to shout about it. You pass a toadstool, bright red with white dots, nature's version of a "do not eat me" sign, and somewhere to your left, a nightbird coughs like it's had a long day. There's no trail marker, no signs. But you keep moving, the way dreams sometimes carry you forward without question. It begins to glow. You blink slowly. He smiles slowly. Everything is slow now. A light. Maybe subscribe, so we can find each other again in the woods. And if you're feeling brave, comment your location and the local time. Not because anything terrible happens, just because it's very, very slow. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. Just to remind yourself that the world is wide and full of sleepy wanderers like you. He looks at you, like he's been expecting this moment for years. Before we slip too far in, if you're enjoying this quiet moment, consider gently pressing that like button. One last thing, you probably won't make it through this day. You follow him without speaking. He doesn't ask you to. The path is not a path, just an agreement between the man's feet and the earth. As the canopy thickens, the world dims, but the lantern's glow grows stronger, like it's feeding on the dark. Eventually, the man stops in front of a fallen log, sits without a word, and gestures for you to do the same. The mushrooms. All of them. Back in the 10th century, certain monastic orders, particularly in what is now eastern France, devoted entire seasons to cataloging the mushrooms of the woods. The hermit picks up a fungus nearby, cradles it like a baby bird, and holds it to the lantern. And somewhere behind you, a moth flutters through the lantern's aura like it's browsing a soft-lit bookstore. You wake up or you don't. The hermit is still there, and so are you. And so is the lantern, now hanging from a twisted branch, like it's always belonged there. It tastes like chamomile, pine needles, and a hint of root you can't place. The warmth curls through you, like a nap you didn't know you needed. The light hasn't changed. Maybe it doesn't. This forest was once a monastery garden, he says, stirring the fire with a stick that is also a bone, that is also maybe just a stick. You squint, unsure whether he means metaphorically or literally. All our torches and lamps and chandeliers, mimicry. The evidence is, well, dim. That's becoming your main activity out here. Agreeing with things you only half understand, but fully feel. Fungi were here before fire, before us. Bioluminescence isn't decoration, it's memory. The world is shrinking to this fire, this cup, this softly pulsing lantern. He doesn't clarify. The hermit listens, really listens, like someone taking dictation from the forest. Then he reaches behind him and pulls out a small, leather-bound notebook with no title. He flips it open to a page with a squiggly drawing and a few short notes in a language you don't know. Or maybe it's Latin. Or maybe it's just very bad handwriting. This, he says, is the lantern seed. He offers you something in a carved wooden cup. You sip without asking. It sprouts in hollows where someone once sat for a long, long time, thinking about what could have been. Lovely. He finally speaks again. It's vanished now. Or maybe it never was. The forest has you, and you are not in a hurry. In the early 12th century, Benedictine monks scattered across Europe found solace in remote forests. Some were sent by the church, others fled politics or plague. The forest hums in that subtle way alive, but not demanding. No traffic, no phones, just the gentle chorus of trees negotiating sunlight. The hermit pokes the fire again. They carved out small cloisters between the trees, growing what they could, recording what they saw. He shows you a sketch, drawn on leathered birch bark. It's crude, but you recognize the shape of a fungus you've never seen. This one, he says, grows only where monks once wept. You don't know if he's serious, and frankly, neither does he. One group, now mostly forgotten, built a scriptorium beneath a canopy of birch and beech, where they wrote not only scripture, but also long treatises on mushrooms, mosses, and why squirrels seem to judge you. The hermit says none of this, but you feel it, like the ground remembers. Nearby, a snail climbs the edge of a flat stone with the confidence of someone who has nowhere better to be. You know, he mutters, some people think the lanterns grew first, that we copied them. Historians still debate whether bioluminescent mushrooms inspired early lighting concepts, or if that's just a poetic idea passed around in tired circles. You nod again. A sudden breeze passes, and the trees whisper in creaks and rustles. According to him, because at this point, sure, the lantern seed is not a seed at all, but a spore cluster that only grows under two conditions: silence and unspoken grief. He leans in slightly. That's why it glows. All those unspoken things, they have to go somewhere. You feel your heartbeat settle into a slower rhythm. And remember the mossy path you came in on? The hermit rises slowly, like bread that's finally ready. He motions again with his lantern, and the two of you begin to walk, not toward anywhere specific, just deeper. The ground beneath your feet squishes faintly, not unpleasantly. Somewhere, water is trickling, maybe from a stream or just a very lazy waterfall. You know, he says, casually dodging a spiderweb that you walk directly into. The monks used to believe mushrooms were a middle ground, not quite plant, not quite animal. He stops and peers at you, just like people. It's hard to tell if it was once a well, a font, or just a convenient place to drop dramatic lines in a medieval play. The hermit crouches next to it, brushing aside a layer of lichen with the tenderness of someone unwrapping a gift. You hum in response, a forest-appropriate sound. There's something about this next stretch of woodland thicker, older, holier, if you believe in that kind of thing. Tree trunks widen like they've been collecting years instead of rings. The branches above you are so tightly interlaced that you have to squint to see the sky, if you even remembered the sky existed. Not in fear, a fox, a very lost monk, but it's just the wind again. Always the wind, in recognition. One monk sat here every morning for 12 years, watching a single patch of mushrooms, never spoke, barely moved. They say he grew roots himself. You do not ask what kind. He begins to play a thin, breathy melody that doesn't go anywhere, doesn't try to impress, just exists, like dew, or quiet. You just have to sit still long enough for it to speak. One account describes Brother Aldrich, who, after 3 years of solitude, claimed to have learned the language of bark beetles. Not because of the music, necessarily, but perhaps in agreement with it. Historians, to this day, still argue whether Aldrich was divinely gifted or simply very, very bored. You've made an impression. You arrive at what looks like a ruined stone basin, covered in moss and ringed by damp earth. This is where they tested their theories, he says, almost too quietly. It's probably not true. But who's going to fact-check a guy with a fungus lamp? Historical records do mention certain reclusive monks, particularly in 12th century Saxony, who practiced sylvan silence, a forest-based vow that combined contemplation with ecosystem observation. The hermit gestures again, and you peer into the basin. At the center, nestled in the soil, is a single glowing mushroom. Not big, not loud, but absolutely radiant. It pulses in slow, sleepy rhythms, faint, then golden, then faint again. This one, the hermit says, remembers everything that was whispered here. The idea makes your scalp tingle. Nearby, something rustles in the leaves. You turn your head, expecting something. The hermit sits on a rock and pulls out what looks like a flute carved from bone. As the music drifts around you, you notice mushrooms beginning to shimmer faintly at the edges of the basin. A beetle scurries past your toe, its shell iridescent like spilled oil. It pauses, seems to examine your foot, then hurries on. The hermit finishes the song and exhales like a man who has just put the forest back in order. People always think silence is empty, he says, but it's full. You nod. Of course you do. You're not sure how long you've been here. Time doesn't seem to apply. The light hasn't changed. The air is still soft, still damp, still deeply nonchalant about your presence. Each one contains a possibility, a new lantern, or just another soggy spot on the ground. You never know. Now the hermit is talking again, this time about spores. Found mostly in Japan and Brazil, though there's been the occasional rogue patch found in someone's forgotten backyard compost pile. It thrives in humidity, darkness, and a complete lack of human attention. You relate. They travel through the air like tiny messengers, he says, tracing spirals in the dirt. You're building a lullaby with your hands and not even trying. You're part of the forest now, he says. The hermit doesn't react. Maybe it's just one of the forest's many moods. Or maybe you imagined it. A bit dramatic, but in the current lighting, fair. On its surface is what appears to be a miniature city of mushrooms' tiny caps, layered shelves, spindly stalks curling like the handwriting of someone dreaming. They glow faintly. Of course they do. This, the hermit says, is the archive. You're not here to know. You're here to feel. The hermit picks up his lantern again. The mushrooms inside pulse, content. He looks at you. He mapped spores onto sheet music. His fellow monks apparently tolerated this until he tried to stage a mushroom-only choir. The manuscript was lost, though scholars think he might have been a few decades ahead of his time, or just consuming the wrong batch of fungi. And so you walk once more, into the dark that isn't really dark at all. Historians remain, let's say, divided. Apparently, there's a fungus called Mycena chlorophyllus that glows in the dark like a little green ghost. He just starts touching the mushrooms lightly, with 2 fingers like pressing piano keys. Each touch releases a faint, airy sound. You aren't too sure if it's real, or if your brain has simply decided that glowing fungi must have musical opinions. The hermit walks toward an old stump. You follow. Naturally. You tilt your head. He doesn't explain. In the 13th century, there was an abbot named Father Remundus, who insisted mushrooms grew in mathematical patterns that corresponded to Gregorian chant. The hermit turns to you suddenly. Would you like to try? You nod. That's your thing now. You touch a cap. It vibrates faintly under your fingertip, and you hear. Well, not a note. More of a feeling. Like being remembered by something older than language. You press another, and another. The air shimmers. A few moths gather overhead, intrigued or maybe just easily impressed. When you look back at the hermit, he's watching you, not proud, not amused, just present. Something shifts in the underbrush, and for a moment, you glimpse movement. A small figure, perhaps a child, barefoot and silent, slipping between trees. That's the thing about this place. Certainty drips away like morning mist. We'll go deeper now. You nod again, of course. Where else would you go? The path narrows. Or perhaps the trees lean in closer, as if eavesdropping on your thoughts. You duck instinctively under a branch that seems to appear just in time to threaten your forehead. The hermit, meanwhile, walks ahead without bending, as though the forest itself makes exceptions for him. The mushroom lantern swings softly at his side, casting strange greenish-gold shadows on the trunks and leaves. They move like old ghosts too lazy to haunt. You step carefully over a log and realize it's not a log, but a collapsed wall, stone overgrown with ivy and moss, and the patient weight of years. The monastery's heart. In the center, a flat slab, likely once a table. You chuckle, because it's polite, and also surprisingly funny. You weren't aware chapels could relocate. But again, questioning anything feels oddly out of place here. Now it holds a cluster of tall, white mushrooms that shimmer like powdered snow under moonlight. The hermit crouches next to them and sniffs. The hermit says nothing, but you catch the corner of a smile playing on his lips. Where bread met fire and silence met butter. You pause. That sounds like a poem, or an oddly specific tattoo. This was the kitchen, the hermit murmurs. You obey, despite the pebbles. A candle, unlit, sits in its palm. On the opposite side, mushrooms bloom in symmetrical rows, like pews made of velvet and light. Arches still stand, if not proudly, then stubbornly. It's less a chapel, now and more a suggestion. You follow his gaze to a patch of stones arranged in a circle. And indeed, the wind passes through the broken archway like a sigh, catching loose leaves and making them dance offering. And the lantern glows steady in the quiet, like it's listening too. Clitoside nebularis, he mutters. Cloud caps. Very moody mushrooms, best enjoyed with melancholy stew. He grins faintly at his own joke, like the air has been holding its breath for a century, and isn't sure whether to exhale. In medieval times, especially during long winters, monks foraged for fungi to supplement their austere diets. They called these the whispering mushrooms, he says. Supposedly, if you sat still beside them long enough, they'd share the recipe for eternal patience. They believed mushrooms could carry the memory of the forest into their body's food as communion, in a way. Some orders developed complex sorting rituals, often involving hand-drawn charts and moral categories like humble, proud, or suspiciously shiny. One monk even insisted mushrooms with a certain tilt to their caps were in league with temptation. Historians still debate whether he was metaphorical or just really bad at gardening. The hermit runs his finger along one of the caps. You consider trying it, but your foot's asleep and a nearby beetle is giving you judgmental side-eye. He stands again, slower this time, but the effort has interest. Let's find the chapel, he says, if it hasn't walked off. You blink. As you move on, you hear something behind you, just a light pat-pat of small feet. When you turn, there's nothing there. You step over a stone inscribed faintly with a symbol. A circle wrapped in vines, or maybe roots, or maybe your imagination's working overtime. As the trees open slightly, you see it ahead, a partially crumbled stone structure, half-eaten by time and vegetation. The hermit stops at the entrance and removes his sandals, not that you remembered he was wearing any, and motions for you to do the same. Inside, the silence is dense. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of something else. In one corner, a statue leans, headless and moss-covered. They used to hold vespers here, the hermit says softly. Now, the forest sings them instead. You sit on the stone floor. It's cold, of course, but not unkind. Time slows further. You're not sure how that's possible, but it happens. The wind barely moves. Your breath feels longer, like each inhale has become a paragraph. The hermit has taken to kneeling near a corner of the chapel, whispering something in a language that might be Latin or might be forest speak. He's lighting a tiny cone of resin that smells like pine needles and wet rocks. often tucked into corners or carved into cave walls. These spaces were meant for the prayers that didn't fit the usual mold. No chants, no structure. Just quiet confession to something vast. One such chapel, hidden in a Spanish grove, bore an inscription that reads simply, "Say what you cannot say." You inhale, can feel your thoughts melt into the floor. In front of you, something stirs. A beetle, perhaps. No too elegant. You follow. You're always following now. As you step outside, the air feels newer. Not fresher, just more aware of your presence. It's a tiny deer, barely the size of a rabbit, with delicate legs and ears like silk. It stands between two pillars, backlit by the lantern. It blinks at you. You blink back. Fair trade. Kneel. Feel the cold earth on your knees and the warmth of the lantern nearby. The hollow breathes softly. You lean close and say nothing, because somehow the tree already knows. Tall. They believed the tree would absorb it and carry it downward into the roots, where the fungi waited, where the mushrooms would remember, but never judge. Wide, bark dark as midnight. Arbor Dolores, he says, with a kind of reverence normally reserved for cake or cathedrals. At its base is a hollow, inside which a soft green light glows faint but constant. The hermit doesn't acknowledge it. Maybe he doesn't need to. You're in the chapel of the last word, he says, stretching slowly. The monks built it for prayers that couldn't be spoken aloud. Fears, hopes, curse words. You smile. Finally, a sacred space you can relate to. In the 11th century, cloistered monastic communities sometimes designated private chapels for unvoiced devotion. That's where they left the unsaid things, he murmurs. You both sit in silence for a while. The forest outside the chapel sways gently. Branches creak. A squirrel somewhere sneezes or laughs. Hard to tell. Scholars still debate if these spaces were mystical innovations or clever loopholes from monks desperate to vent. The hermit pulls a scroll from the folds of his tunic. It's not ancient, just crinkled with love. He unrolls it gently, revealing a map of the forest hand-drawn in glowing ink. You squint. The symbols shimmer slightly, refusing to stay still. Your eye catches a small image of a mushroom lantern, just like his, near a drawn tree labeled Arbor Dolores Tree of Sorrows. He notices your gaze. The hermit rises, brushes dust from his knees, and gestures again. You walk past the same beetle again, who appears to be making excellent time. You salute each other like polite travelers. The hermit points to a tree ahead. People once knelt here, he explains, to whisper what they couldn't bear to speak elsewhere. You approach. You stay there, kneeling before the tree that listens, for a while longer than you planned. Not that you ever planned anything here. Your thoughts drift like falling leaves, unhurried, silent, soft around the edges. Eventually, the hermit touches your shoulder, not urgently, just to remind you he exists. You rise slowly, the way people rise from warm baths or long dreams, and the two of you walk again. Something calls from high in the canopy, possibly a bird, possibly a sentient pinnacone. You've stopped questioning. The lantern swings like a clock with no numbers. The moss grows thicker. The trees tilt more dramatically. A fallen log is blanketed with mushrooms and hues you didn't know existed. Plum, sea glass blue, goldenrod, and something best described as hesitant purple. You know, there's a mushroom that only grows on the backs of turtles. You pause, mid-step. He grins, or so they say. He never confirms if it's true. And frankly, it feels better that way. Instead of parchment, they grew fungal gardens to represent entire volumes of collected wisdom. Some of these, he says softly, contain dreams. Others, just soup recipes. One mushroom signified a hymn. Another, a treatise on humility. Some historians believe this was a form of proto-bioencoding. Others think they just had too much time on their hands. Some mushrooms have grown tall and thin, like proud scribes. Others squat low and broad, like content philosophers. A rare color in this forest, a quiet sort of hope. She didn't say much, the hermit adds, but she hummed the whole time. Something about the sea. One wiggles slightly as you pass, and you resist the urge to apologize. He doesn't speak for a time, letting the forest reclaim the soundscape. Twigs snap. You sit too, because you're nothing if not consistent now. The lantern sways gently from a nearby hook-a-bent root shaped like a shepherd's crook. It seems happier hanging here, among its kind. The forest is silent again, but full as always. This is how we recorded things, he says. Not with ink. That one's new, he says. She left it here last week. You raise an eyebrow. She? He only shrugs. With spore. With shape. You imagine a girl humming near tide pools, spores drifting from her hands, like confetti at a wedding no one else was invited to. It's a good image. Then, softly, the hermit whispers, "It's time for the garden." And like always, you rise. With color. Naturally, no such turtle has ever been found. Or maybe it has, and it simply didn't feel like being seen. Then he clears his throat and says a mushroom with a broad, flat cap and speckled stem grows from the stump. Its edges curl slightly, almost like pages. You realize each mushroom is a chapter. You blink. Rows of tree stumps have been carved flat and inscribed with symbols. On each one, a different mushroom glowing softly. There must be dozens, hundreds. Historians recorded a similar legend in a 15th century Welsh bestiary, the Testudo fungorum, or fungus turtle, a mythical creature believed to carry glowing mushrooms on its shell through ancient forests, offering light to lost wanderers. As you move deeper into the woods, the atmosphere changes subtly. "Welcome to the library," the hermit says, gesturing to a clearing. He leads you to one and sits. You peer at one nearby. In the 14th century, a reclusive sect of monks in the Black Forest were known for an unusual archival system. The hermit begins to hum a low, winding melody, and several mushrooms brighten in response. You wonder if this is reading or remembering. You nod. Honestly, those are equally valuable. You walk among the stumps, not touching, just noticing. Then the hermit points to a small stump in the far corner of the clearing. The mushroom atop that stump is different. Smaller, paler, and still wet with dew. It glows faintly not green, but lavender. You sit beside it for a moment and close your eyes. The garden isn't far. In fact, you realize with a strange tingle you've been circling it for hours. It's nestled in the middle of everything, like a forgotten word on the tip of your tongue. Flowers bloom here, but not like any you've seen, some tall and skeletal, others puffy and bell-shaped, all glowing slightly under the mushroom light. Even the air feels different, cooler, but gentle, like walking through memory. A wide clearing opens before you, bathed in a silver mist that curls around your ankles like affectionate cats. Just walk slowly, reverently, as though each blade of grass might be someone's great-grandmother. He touches it gently and closes his eyes. Every time I plant one of these, he says, I forget something. You glance around. The garden is vast. You wonder how much he's left behind. You follow on softened feet, careful not to crush anything that seems like it's trying. Not here. You look down, and at the base of the flower you knelt beside, a new mushroom has begun to grow. Pale lavender. Just like the one in the library. The girl. The song about the sea. They planted gardens for the express purpose of letting go. We'll visit the sleep yard before the night ends. You glance up at the sky. The lantern pulses gently, casting shadows shaped like lullabies across the path ahead. And together, you walk into the hush. Each flower or fungus symbolized something once held tight grudges, regrets, unfinished symphonies. They called it Hortus Oblivionis, the Garden of Forgetting. Records of the practice are scarce, mostly because, well, they forgot. The hermit doesn't say much. You blink. Forgetting? He nods. They believed memory was a sacred burden, but forgetting, that was an art. This, he says, was where the monks practiced forgetting. In the 13th century, a little-known Carthusian offshoot in northern Italy taught that certain memories should be released into nature rather than clung to. The hermit kneels by a strange flower-white, translucent, its petals drooping like it's sighing. Without touching them, you feel something slide away from your shoulders. Overhead, a few birds circle lazily, perhaps also forgetful of their schedules. People come here, the hermit murmurs, when they don't know what they've lost, and leave when they no longer care. It's not dramatic, just a subtle lightness, like realizing you've been holding your breath for years. You kneel beside a clump of small orange mushrooms shaped like tiny bells. You stay there a while. That could be sad, but it isn't. You wonder if forgetting and remembering are really that different. The hermit stands. Come, he says. Somehow it has become night. Or maybe it always was. The path to the sleep yard is quieter than the rest. Even the forest, so talkative in its silences, seems to take a step back. Though people make that mistake. The grass here is silver blue, and mushrooms dot the field like constellations fallen gently to the ground. Monks who had reached what they deemed the end of their earthly learning would come, lie down on beds of moss, and simply stay, sometimes for days, sometimes for years. Occasionally, one would get back up, stretch, and announce they were ready to rejoin the world. Others, cooler blue, violet, the color of sadness with grace. The moss welcomes you like a grandmother who already knows your favorite tea. The tune is formless, like something invented on the spot and forgotten by the time it ends. Your limbs settle into the earth's memory. The air tastes of rosemary and ash, dew and moonlight. One seems to flicker in rhythm with your breathing. You don't ask questions. Not here. Others stayed so long that mushrooms grew gently around their bodies, curling like cattails around ankles and necks. Whether this was mystical or just extremely poor health care remains a matter of academic squabbling. Each one glows faintly, some flickering like candlelight, others steady as stars. Here, the hermit whispers, is where they came to rest, but not to end. And from far off, so distant it might be imagined, a chime rings once. Just once, and your body remembers how to be still. Your legs feel heavier. Not unpleasant more, like they've decided rushing is no longer an appropriate mode of transport. The wind softens. The trees hold their breath. It looks ordinary. A squat mushroom with a cap like a button. But now it feels enormous. Your footsteps barely make a sound, and when they do, it's the kind of sound that fades before it fully forms, like a memory you almost had. The hermit's lantern glows a gentler hue now, as though even it knows this part of the forest requires softness. He says, "The sleep yard isn't a graveyard. Markers," he says. "Not for people, for moments." He touches one. It glows slightly brighter. You pass through an archway of hanging moss, and the ground opens into a meadow perfectly round, sunken slightly like the earth has bowed inward in reverence. In the 12th century, a monastic enclave near the Carpathians built what they called silent fields, open groves, not for burial, but for long sleeping. You step into the sleep yard. The hermit points toward a cluster of low stone circles, mossy and cracked, each one holding a central mushroom. This one remembers the first time someone sang alone in the woods. You stare. You wander gently among the circles. Some mushrooms seem cheerful, glowing warm yellow. The hermit doesn't speak for a long time. Eventually, he says, "You can lie down if you like." You do. Above you, fireflies blink. Or maybe they're spores. Or maybe both. The hermit sits cross-legged beside you, humming again. You realize this place doesn't record history. It relieves it, like an exhale that's taken centuries to finish. You wake not quite refreshed, not quite sleepy, just weightless. The stars overhead have shifted slightly, but the air hasn't changed. We're nearly at the end, he says. You don't ask of what. Their bark peels like old paper, flaking truths. A breeze catches some, and the pieces twirl through the air like slow-motion confetti, still thick with dream and dusk and the soft breath of mushrooms. The hermit is already standing. His lantern floats above him now, tethered not by rope, but by faith. They recorded prayers by arranging spores in intricate spirals, meant to be read by the forest itself. Whether the forest answered is unknown. Historians still debate if this was a theological innovation, or just monks avoiding winter chores. The hermit climbs in, without hesitation, and gestures for you to join. Thousands of tiny carvings, spirals, symbols, dots in arranged clusters. The language of spores, the hermit explains. And from the trees, the girl arrives. The one with the sea song. It's time, he says, to meet the ones who remember even me. And as you walk, you realize you're not alone. You rise unsure if your legs are legs or just ideas now. You recognize her by the way the air around her shifts soft but certain. Written not with ink, but pattern. You touch one gently. It feels like velvet. Figures you hadn't noticed before, now emerging like dreams at dawn. You fit barely. But the inside is warm, carved smooth by something time, patience, or extremely bored squirrels. He leads you out of the sleep yard, through a corridor of birches so white they seem drawn in chalk. Soon you come to a hollowed stump, large enough to sit in. The walls are covered in etchings. The lantern dims. It's quiet here, he says, because this is where the story stops echoing. Outside, you hear the sudden, crisp crack of a twig. Something or someone is nearby. Her hair is tangled with moss, and in her hands, she holds a fresh mushroom, pale lavender like before. Back in the 9th century, a little-known order in northern Gaul believed that mushrooms were divine punctuation-grown commas and periods, scattered by a god with a particularly fungal sense of humor. The hermit presses a finger to one of the spirals. The hermit doesn't move. She's back, he murmurs. She's barefoot, of course, and glowing faintly, though not from any lantern. She doesn't speak, just places the mushroom at the base of the stump and nods. Then she turns and walks back into the forest. The hermit watches her go with the quiet pride of someone who's raised many daughters, most of them trees. After a moment, he stands. You follow him toward the one place you haven't yet visited, the heart of the forest. The core. The lantern brightens, sensing something ahead. The beetle's there, still determined. The deer, a raccoon, a girl carved from bark. They walk with you, slowly, toward whatever waits at the end of the glow. The path fades entirely now. No more mossy tracks, no more soft hints of direction. Just earth, branches, and the sense that you are being allowed to continue, not led. His lantern floats beside him, no longer swinging. It hovers with purpose now, as if guiding you to something it has known far longer than he has. The forest has opened its palm, and you are standing in it. Their roots rise from the ground in tangled arcs, and you step over them like crossing thresholds into a different kind of story. The hermit walks slower, like he's savoring the distance between steps. You pass between two ancient oaks, their trunks twisted together like dancers paused mid-spin. Not carved, not built, grown, towering, layered, a cathedral of caps and stems and glowing veils. Golden hues blend with pale blues, purples, ghostly whites. But somehow, you feel the forest listening. He opens the jar, lets them drift up. The lantern mother absorbs them like a sigh. I've carried those since spring, he says. They were ready. You can ask, he says, if there's anything left. You aren't sure what to ask. She replies in release in the way your shoulders ease, in the way your stomach softens, in the way your thoughts stop tripping over themselves. You don't even know what you want to know anymore. But your mouth opens, and something comes out quiet, honest, surprising even to you. Not with ears, with presence. A single vine spirals around the structure, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Almost there, the hermit says, though that's a lie. But you don't need to. That part is already growing somewhere in the soil. There's no such thing as there. You appreciate the honesty. In the center of the grove, nestled in a natural bowl of stone and soil, is what looks like an altar, though it's made entirely of mushrooms. The lantern dims automatically, as if bowing. This, says the hermit, is the lantern mother. You say nothing. It would feel rude. He kneels. One scholar, after extensive research, simply wrote, "She glows." That's enough. You kneel. It feels right. No voices speak. According to obscure fragments from a 10th century Flemish codex, some monks believed the lantern mother was a kind of fungal deity, an ancient intelligence that stored memory, healed sorrow, and glowed in response to kindness. She was not worshipped in the usual way. Instead, people sat quietly in her grove and thought soft thoughts. Sometimes they left behind shoes or poems or soup ingredients. She did not judge, only remembered. Historians still argue whether this was a literal being or just a metaphor for shared consciousness. The hermit reaches into the folds of his robe and produces a small jar. Inside it, spores glowing softly. You watch the mushroom cathedral flicker, and for a moment, it seems to shimmer through you like light passing through stained glass. Then the hermit turns to you, and though no voice answers, you understand. The lantern mother doesn't reply in words. You could cry. You sit there for a long time, maybe hours, maybe less. The Lantern Mother continues to glow, unbothered by time. She is not a schedule. She is a presence, a nightlight for the soul. Eventually, the hermit stands and stretches, the sound of his back popping echoing slightly too loudly for this sacred place. He grimaces. Even fungi can't fix that. You smile. It's the first thing you've felt on your face in a while, like rediscovering a limb. But somehow, you still find yourself reaching into your coat. There's something in your hand, like you've been walking with stones in your coat without realizing it. The hermit watches quietly. You hadn't noticed it before. But yes, you can feel it too. It's tired. And so you begin walking again, back toward the place where it all began. But it's been with you this whole time. You walk with him again, back through the arch of the oak trees, and the lantern rejoins you, not quite leading, not quite following, just accompanying. You don't remember writing it, but the handwriting is yours. You don't read it. You don't need to. You place it gently on the surface of the water. Mushrooms line the path like paper lanterns at a sleepy festival. Fireflies join them, blinking in what you suspect might be code. There's a stillness now between you, a comfortable one. Not silence born of awkwardness, but of having said everything that mattered already. The forest seems lighter somehow, even though night has fallen fully now. Everything glows faintly. He unwraps it carefully. An old comb, a torn bit of parchment, and a single stone. Each item he places in the water, and each one slowly sinks, leaving no ripple. They weren't mine anymore, he says. But I held on. The hermit leads you toward a small pool. A surface is so still, it might as well be glass. You see your reflection for the first time. Your eyes look different, clearer, or maybe less full. This, he says, is where we return what we borrowed. You follow suit, dipping your hands as well. The water is cool, but not cold. It feels like forgiveness. He crouches by the edge and dips his hands into the water. The hermit opens a small satchel and removes something wrapped in cloth. Coins, combs, locks of hair. No magic was promised, just peace. Strangely, the pond was said to glow faintly at night, though no bioluminescent organisms were ever identified. Historians remain baffled and slightly enchanted. In 12th century Finland, folklore tells of a forgetting pond hidden deep in forestland, where travelers would leave items tied to memories they no longer needed to carry. You don't have anything in your pockets. You unwrap it, a small, crumpled note. It floats, then sinks, and suddenly you feel taller, lighter. Then, after a moment, he says, "It's nearly time for the lantern to rest." You look at it. It glows still, faithfully. The path narrows again, though this time it doesn't feel like it is closing in. It feels like the forest is wrapping you up, tucking you in, like the final chapter of a book that knows how to whisper its ending. You and the hermit walk quietly. The lantern, dimmer now, sways like a sleepy child. Its light glances off tree bark and spider silk, turning the ordinary into lullaby. The sounds are soft. Leaf hush, distant owl, a single drop of water falling from a branch and landing on your shoulder like punctuation. Like saying, "The tea's gone cold," or "There's a squirrel staring at me again." You nod. You're not the same as when you came, the hermit says. It isn't a compliment or a warning, just an observation. You don't, but as soon as he says it, You do. Vaguely. You passed it near the beginning, barely noticed it. Just a tree, several acorns with names carved into them. You thought perhaps he slept in the open, like a leaf. Its glow dims until it's no brighter than a dream you can barely remember. But of course not. Even hermits need cupboards. He pushes the door open with a grunt. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask for attention. It just exists, calmly, like an old cat that chooses your lap without permission or apology. Not everyone stays, he says. Most folks leave before the mushrooms start talking. You're not sure if he's joking. You don't ask. But now, it's different. Not because it changed. The lantern glows faintly, like it's smiling in its sleep. Because you did. Nestled into its base is a collection of tiny carved figures. Wooden monks, birds, and sleepy-looking cats. Offerings, maybe. Or memories. Or just hobbies. But in the realization that Yuval walked in a circle and seen a rock for the second time, it is in the noticing, one monk wrote, that the holy arrives. A literal wooden door, nestled in the hillside. Weathered, iron hinges. A handle made from twisted root. Home, the hermit says. He stops at a crooked tree that leans like its mid-bough. You remember this tree? He asks. Some 9th century East Frankish hermits believed that enlightenment was not in distant visions or mountain heights. Historians still debate whether that monk was being profound or just very tired and a little sarcastic. As if, even in its exhaustion, it wants to show you something important. Just ahead, barely visible between moss and stone, is a door. You look at the tree again. It bows slightly in the wind. You bow back. The hermit chuckles. The lantern suddenly rises higher, shining a little brighter. Not a metaphor. You weren't expecting this. The smell is warm, damp wool, dried herbs, beeswax, and... Is that soup? You step inside. Low ceiling. Stacks of old journals. A kettle. He places the lantern on a small table, where it rests finally. He sighs and pours you a cup of something herbal and unidentifiable. You sip it. It tastes like ... bedtime. Instead, you sit on a stool and let the quiet wrap itself around you. Outside, you hear wind moving through pine needles like a lullaby written by trees. The hermit shuffles through a stack of ancient, crumbling papers. Some are in Latin, others in something stranger. You spot a drawing crudely rendered, but familiar. I tried to document them, he says, but they don't like being pinned down. You both laugh softly. Then he hands you something, a page, torn from one of the older journals. On it, a single sentence written in looping ink, slightly smudged by time or tea or rain, but a way to remember the self you left behind while being polite. He reportedly lived in silence for 20 years, except for weekly conversations with his garden snail, Horace. He holds up a sketch of what appears to be a toad playing a harp made of moss. You read it 3 times. It feels like something you already knew but had forgotten. A mushroom, glowing, smiling. You raise an eyebrow. Or maybe I was just very hungry that day. Just enough to remind you you're not alone in it. You step forward. The forest breathes, and the path begins to carry you. Now let's move gently to the final chapter. You take it carefully. It's warm. Then he says, and next time, bring soup. This is your turn. You look down the road. It stretches out, familiar but distant. You turn to him, unsure what to say. He nods as if to say, yes, yes, I know. It says, not all lights are meant to lead. Some are meant to sit with you until the dark isn't scary. Outside, the forest seems changed again, not darker, just softer. As if the trees know it's almost time to say goodbye. According to a lesser-known 14th century hermit named Ilario of the Bark Grove, solitude was not an escape from others. Scholars have never agreed whether Horace was real or metaphor. The hermit begins gathering twine and cloth. "I'll walk you partway," he says. You look at him, puzzled. Eventually, you come to the fork in the path, the one you passed hours ago, or days, or something in between. He smiles. Everyone leaves eventually, even if they don't want to. You walk a while in silence. The lantern stays behind, asleep on its shelf. The hermit stops there. You hesitate. Then he reaches into his robe and pulls something out. A tiny, round mushroom faintly glowing. "For the dark spots," he says, "won't light the way." You smile. The path, though familiar, now feels richer, as if it's carrying stories in its soil. Every root beneath your feet, every leaf above your head, hums with quiet knowledge. Or perhaps you're just imagining it. At this point, the line between your thoughts and the forest's secrets has become a little blurry. Ancient sailors once used them to cross oceans. You're using them now to cross something much quieter. The tiny mushroom in your pocket glows just enough to remind you that the hermit wasn't a dream, even if his door has vanished from memory like smoke in morning air. One friar drew a constellation that looked suspiciously like a mushroom, labeled only the Watcher. Scholars have suggested it was either a warning or just his way of saying he was hungry again. You hold it in your hand, and for a brief moment, it feels like it pulses, not biologically, but emotionally, like a heartbeat shared between friends. As you walk, the stars come out in the slices of sky above the canopy, some twinkling, some steady. "They bloom," wrote one, "not to feed us. No urgent questions, no dramatic farewells, but to remind us the soil remembers. Let yourself rest here just for a while." The forest has no clocks. In the 13th century, monks in Bohemia mapped star patterns and forest groves in the same notebooks, believing that both sky and earth told the same story, just in different fonts. Just the slow, steady rhythm of trees, breathing in and out, like the lungs of the world exhaling moss-scented dreams into the dusk. You find yourself humming, though you don't know the tune. And beneath it all, the hum of ancient roots winding their way through centuries of soil. It doesn't ask you to follow, or think, or do anything at all. The pause after a final page. The space between thoughts, wide and gentle, like a yawn made of stars. There's no need to go anywhere. Not now. You're already where you need to be. Just enough to remember that not every light must lead. Some lights are just there to keep you company in the dark. Good night, traveler. Sleep well beneath the trees. It simply exists beside you, a soft companion in the hush of the woods. Soft, flickering, timeless. Let the images drift. Let the words settle like leaves. There's a clearing ahead, and in its center stands something strange, an old wooden frame, half a doorway, missing its door, just the outline. You walk through it instinctively. Nothing changes, and yet everything does. The air smells slightly of honey and stone. The moss underfoot feels like velvet dipped in memory. You sit down on a smooth rock, not because you're tired, but because it feels like a place meant for stopping. You pull the glowing mushroom from your pocket. It's not bright, but it's enough. And then a soft wind, like breath. The trees murmur something in a language you're never meant to fully understand. You listen anyway. One last strange fact to hold in your palm before the fade. In a remote region of medieval Bavaria, some monks believed that mushrooms were the forest's version of angels. The hermit would probably chuckle at that. You stare up at the trees, and your eyes begin to slow. You let the silence stretch. Nothing rushes you. Just you, a glowing mushroom, and the memory of a man who catalogued the stars by growing them in the dirt. Now, gently, let the world soften. No buzzing notifications, no urgent matters to chase you from your thoughts. The mushroom in your palm gives off a faint warmth, now not light, not heat, just presence. Around you, the sounds grow quieter. A rustle here, a soft nightbird there. You feel the air growing cooler against your skin, wrapping you in that familiar nighttime calm, the kind that makes your shoulders sink a little lower, your breath slow a little longer. It's the quiet that follows a story well told. The hermit, the lantern, the bioluminescent catalogue of unknowable life, it all lives somewhere in the folds of your memory now. And when you wake, whenever that may be, perhaps you'll carry a little of the glow with you.